Thumbs down. All right.
Okay, so I don't know. I don't know what the stream sounds like. Okay, someone said now it's good.
Now it's good. All right.
All right, so I guess we'll start over. New
All right.
start, new beginning.
You want
Sounding
to you
good?
want to you want to try the video once more and just see if it goes back to shit, or
No.
no? Do you guys care about no video or what?
um, I don't even want to screw with it. Let's just go.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of shitty, man. What the hell's the point of a live stream if you can't even see? Whatever though.
The point of the live stream is that people can interact with the conversation.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. So,
It's good that way.
all right. So where were we?
I don't know. Just start from the beginning.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for sticking
Yeah.
with this horrendous start.
Thanks for sticking around. Said the Quick Freeze 4 is in here. He says the audio sounds perfect.
Good, good. What a nightmare. Um. So yeah, but I was just saying that this current generation is really taking a lot of time to pick up for me. I've never been so disinterested in a generation of gaming as the PS4 and Xbox One, especially the Xbox One. I really have not. I think I've played the Xbox One for maybe a total of 25 hours. Um, I just I don't have not even anything coming up really interesting. If there was like a Fable game coming out, like not the online craft or whatever the new one is, but a standard straight up Fable game, that might have my interest. But the Xbox One is looking really grim in terms of content on it and what's coming out. PS4, I don't know. I'm at a loss for this generation, to be honest with you. I don't know exactly what to say, or if it's going to be getting any better with all the HD collections and remakes, and I don't know. It's a strange time.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if you guys heard me talk about this before, but I think that, like, the current generation has taken this weird kind of turn in that there's a weird divide between the way games are sold now. And I think the way this happens is that you have the kind of image of cheap downloadable games and AAA games, and it makes this weird kind of break in the system where you have everything that comes out as a download only game. People think of it as kind of a low budget, short kind of experience that isn't going to be like super spectacular. And that's not to say that there aren't any spectacular downloadable only games. I mean, even recently, Ori and the Blind Forest came out, and everybody seemed to love it. And Journey was last gen, and that came out, and it was amazing for everybody. And I think those are kind of good experiences, but they're few and far between. And you'll have also on the other end, you have everybody expecting these kind of AAA games. So when a game comes out and it's not something that people think of as a AAA game, it's a little bit below that. Like, it's something that you would give a 7, something that you might see. I know he was in the chat. Nostalgic Dan unboxes lots of games, and he was showing Omega Quintet, for example. It's not a AAA game, and it's the kind of thing people will just overlook immediately because it's not going to get like 10s in there or 8s and 9s in its reviews. And I think people, it hurts the way gaming is done, because it kind of cuts out a huge market of people who aren't usually waiting for this kind of thing. People game. There's all types of people who game, and there's not like people who just want AAA experiences or just want cheap downloadable experiences that are short. I think there's a mid-market there full of like all types of weird little niches that are just being totally ignored, at least in the kind of US market. And in previous generations there was tons of that. The PS2 was full of it. The PS1 had tons of that stuff. PS3 even had a bit more of it, a bit more than now, but a bit less than the previous gens. And then this gen has followed that kind of trend where it's almost gone. There's like almost no mid-market for those things, except for a few kind of, smaller cases. A lot of the mid-market developers have completely gone out of business. It's kind of a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess, and role-playing games are even changing on me. I mean, I like dungeon crawlers. Don't get me wrong. These they're kinds of subgenre in the RPG kind of like family, but we're seeing less and less traditional role-playing games, and that's really turning me off too. I mean, games like Bravely Default and Xenoblade Chronicles are becoming much more rare. I don't know if it's a sign of a shifting taste market, but I really miss these epic, not necessarily turn-based RPGs, but like overworld exploration and big deep stories. And I'm playing through Xenoblade again, and I think one of the things that really has pulled me into that game is, for those of you that have played it, and Joe, have you played Xenoblade Chronicles?
I haven't played it.
Okay. The game takes place, there was two giant beings that were locked in combat. There's the Bionis and the Mechanis, and they're like giant mechs, and they were having a battle, and they battled and battled, and then they both died, and they kind of froze in time with like the Bionis with his sword out, and the Mechanis, and they just frozen, and they've been frozen in time so long that this like world has started growing on these two giant beings. And when you're in the game, you're walking around in the world, and you can look up in the sky, and you can see the sword like looming in the sky, and it's just the most interesting locations. Like the world is so interesting, and it's so much fun to explore. That's really, I mean, you don't see stuff like that where you have a really interesting, like Tales games have overworlds and you can explore, but it's not the most interesting thing. Whereas something like Xenoblade is just the backstory with these two things that have like frozen in time, and there's like trees growing on them, and you're actually living, there's life on these two beings that are dead. And it's just amazing. You make your way up the Bionis, and there's rumors that there's an ancient civilization that lives near the head of the Bionis, and it's just fascinating to explore on the back of these huge dead warriors. It's fascinating stuff, man. That game is amazing.
Yeah, DM Wrestler in the chat here says the 3DS is the middle market system. He's not wrong. I think there are a lot of middle market games on the 3DS, but on the Vita as well. I mean, but the problem with those systems is that they're not exactly the same kind of thing, because people kind of look at things like handhelds and consoles as totally different things. There's plenty of people who don't play handhelds at all, and like what happens is you're casual kind of gamer. You're like kind of person who is like during the PS2 era, everybody had a PS2, and like those kind of people didn't buy games all the time, but they bought games every once in a while. And there was all types of stuff where you can see people bought like weird mid-market games that are not just like the AAA stuff. And what happens there is that currently, when I think the reason that this generation is, even though it's going to sell a lot of consoles, it's not going to meet the kind of level of the PS2, or probably might have trouble with meeting even last gen's totals, only because I think like you've cut out a big area to attract people who you wouldn't otherwise get with just your kind of only big budget or only downloadable stuff. And the 3DS and the Vita both have those things, except like your normal person isn't going to run out to buy a 3DS to play a few games on it, especially if like you're just someone who wants to play on a TV only. And there's a lot of people like that. I mean, I'm in Japan, and in Japan people don't care about that stuff. They like the handhelds more, but in the US, like the handheld market is not very big. I mean, it's big, but it's not, percentage-wise, it's not as big as it would be in other places. And I think a lot of people often say, I mean, read forums, read comment sections. Everybody is like, I wish this was I could play this on a TV. I wish I could play, I wish it wasn't on a handheld. That kind of thing is a pretty common comment that you see. So I think like you can't rely on something like the 3DS as a middle market system to expand the gaming world, in the sense that you can't have those games don't translate to the system, the consoles like the PS4 and the Xbox One, and the Wii U doesn't have anything really, so it's hard. But I love the I love the 3DS and the Vita as well. I think they're great, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to propel consoles.
Yeah, I never understood the mindset where uh, gamers like think it might be a lesser game. I remember a lot of people complained that Valkyria Chronicles 2 was on the PSP and not the PS3, and yeah, I mean, I guess I understand, but I'm just glad that we got the game, and I don't think any less of a game just because it's on a handheld. If anything, I probably enjoy it more. I mean, there's something about just sitting down and firing up a handheld. You don't have to hook anything up or get the seat ready, or you're there. I love playing them in bed. You know, I fall asleep after playing a handheld, and it just to me it makes no difference whether it's on the handheld or the console. I actually kind of prefer handhelds these days. Um, so there's a lot of shit that people miss out on for writing off handhelds, and it's sad, you know.
Yeah,
But
it's rough with that because I think a lot of people do write off handhelds, but it's still like, I mean, the Vita has pretty much been written off in the West. Like,
yeah,
people don't care about it, and I haven't really like, I prefer playing on handhelds too. Like, I often stream my PS4 to my Vita, even though like I'm in the same room as the PS4, just because I prefer to like have the kind of mobility that I have with the handheld, as opposed
yeah,
to being kind of stuck to the couch with the PS4. But I think a lot of people are not like that. Drunken Master Warrior here in the chat says he'd rather play a TV and hasn't bought a handheld since the GBA. Um, I mean, I totally understand that. I think like even like a couple years ago, I would have been in that exact same boat where I would have just been like, I don't really play handhelds that much. I'm not really a handheld gamer. And then like now, I feel like the complete opposite, where I feel like I wish everything came out on a handheld so I didn't have to use my TV at all.
yeah. Now, Drunken Master Warrior, have you like sat down and had some hands-on time with either like a Vita or a 3DS, or have you just like played them in? I'm interested to see that. Um, if I hadn't played much of a handheld since the Game Boy Advance, and I sat down with like a Vita or the 3DS, I would be completely blown away by just how close the handhelds are to mirroring a console experience these days. I mean, obviously, other than the smaller screen, handheld games have become very kind of console-like in terms of, story and play control and depth, and in terms of, not getting a game because it's a handheld game, it's a lesser game. It's still gonna pull you in just as strongly as a console game for sure. So I'd
Yeah.
be interested to hear.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what he has to say. I think there's probably a bit of a lag between the audio and the chat, so I'm not sure when he'll respond. But when he does, we'll keep it going. But I think you're right in saying that there's a big difference between there's a big difference between handhelds and consoles, but there's not a huge difference in the way that the games are played now. Previously on the GBA, it's kind of like playing what's it called, like a Super Famicom or something, or Super Nintendo in your hand. But at that time it was already like way past that generation, and people thought of it as more of like a handheld experience. But now it's not even like incredibly different, because when you play a game on the Vita, you can actually currently you can buy games on the Vita that come out also on the PS4 or PS3 or whatever, and they're
Yeah,
pretty much the same. So having it, he says he has little experience with either of the Vita or the 3DS, and
yeah,
it's understandable, but like you really should try that stuff out, because like it's a lot different than it was in the past. And I kind of know what you're talking about, because I was very similar. Like when I had a GBA and I loved it, but it wasn't like my main thing. I wasn't like way into it, and I mostly played with friends. Like we'd play Advance Wars or something against each other, and the GBA was fun for that. But once the stuff like the Vita or the PSP and the 3DS came out, those things kind of converted me. And I
yeah,
think like I've had a lot more fun experiences with those than I have with my consoles. And I think it's kind of like a missing thing because like a lot of the types of games I like tend to come to only handhelds now. And quick freeze for saying I fell in love with the Persona series because of Persona 4 the Golden, thanks to my Vita. And it's a good example. I think like Persona 4 is a game like it came out on the PS2 and it it has like a huge following, but it was kind of like not as mainstream as it could have been. But with the Vita release, I think a lot of people played it for the first time that way and are realizing like not only well one that the Vita can do like a really in-depth kind of great looking experience, but also, you know, has these games that other places don't have.
Oh yeah, especially if you're a fan of RPGs, um, having a hand, not having either a 3DS or a Vita, or even a DS and PSP, you've missed out on some truly amazing role-playing games. If I relied on the consoles to get my like RPG fix, I'd be extremely disappointed. And um, there's things that the handhelds actually add to RPGs due to their unique feature set. Games like Infinite Space on the DS, where that game is so big in terms of its content that you don't even miss it not being on a console and having the touchscreen for the battles, being able to move your ship forward and back in position, and adding pieces to your ship via the touchscreen, and crew, and managing those things. It's a lot of fun, and games like Avalon Code, where you use the touchscreen to flip through your book and to arrange codes and assemble weapon pieces. I mean, it really adds something unique to the genre, and I couldn't imagine missing out on some of these great games that have come because of the handhelds and their feature sets. It's been a good time.
Yeah, I think of games like you were talking about games that kind of can't work on anything but a handheld, and I think of like stuff like the World Ends with You, where the battle system requires the touchpad so much, but the experience of that game was so good. I mean, so much better than like a lot of I want to say like console RPGs in the last generation are way outshadowed by the handhelds. And I can kind of understand when people were thinking towards, in the last gen that RPGs were kind of dying a bit in the earlier parts at least, because a lot of the stuff that came out. I mean, the Xbox had a bunch of games that came out that were those kind of the Xbox JRPGs, but a lot of them ended up being kind of mediocre, and and then Microsoft just stopped, and the PS3 wasn't really going for a couple years. So in that period, people just kind of thought like, oh, RPGs are kind of dead this gen. And it did pick up a lot towards the end, where there was just a ton of stuff coming out. But I think it kind of turned people off for a while, and it hurt the image. Whereas like at the same time, if you were playing handhelds, you got so much good stuff coming out all the time. The PSP had so much stuff. The DS had a ton of stuff. And some of the best kind of RPG experiences, at least, were on the handhelds, for sure.
Yeah, the PS3 really did, towards the end of its life, started, I mean, especially like NIS, they started really cranking out quite a bit of different RPGs. And that, for me, NIS, for me, is such a hit-or-miss company. I generally don't like a lot of their games for some reason. They're always trying like some strange, quirky systems, and I just don't like a lot of NIS games for some reason. When I watch Nostalgic Dan, he's always unboxing like the newest limited editions. They're great looking sets, and they have good content. It's just it's the actual games that I have a real hard time getting into. But I mean, yeah, the quality stuff like Lost Odyssey, and even like Eternal Sonata, and if you go back a generation before that, you go to the PS2 and Xbox. Obviously, the PS2 had a lot of great games, but when you look at the original Xbox library, I think there was like Sudeki, and the BioWare RPGs withstanding, but there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to pick from on that system at all, and that's probably the most sparse library yet. But how do you feel about the NIS games? Are you a fan of what they put out, and it looks like they're not slowing down anytime soon. You know.
I'm not sure what games NIS publishes in North America. So like when you say NIS games, I just think like Disgaea and um, Firefly Diary and stuff that they actually made, because they don't publish the same stuff in the US. I mean in Japan. But
Yeah.
as far like I like Disgaea, I think it's a good series, and like Phantom Brave, I liked that, and Makai Kingdom. Those were all good games, and they made this game Zex, which is like a card battle RPG, which was really good. But I'm not sure what kind of stuff do they play. I mean, do they publish in the U.S. that
Well,
you're thinking of?
they put out a lot of stuff like I think like with the Last Rebellion and Trinity Universe and stuff like the what's the Artanelico games and the I think they did like the Atelier series. I think it's like Gust and like Compile Heart and all those companies
Yeah, okay,
under
that makes
the
sense though. I mean, if you were thinking of those games as kind of NIS games, like I could see why you would think like you're not like a huge fan, because I think while Compile Heart makes some good games every once in a while, like I think in general, like if you're thinking like what's it called, Idea Factory, like they are I know people like them, but they're really a niche kind of publisher, in the sense that like I think most people aren't going to enjoy their games if you're not into like the kind of style of them. And
yeah.
it seems like NIS was publishing a lot of those.
Yeah.
So I could see why people would be kind of polarized on that. But they don't publish those in Japan, so it's not like even related to them. So I have a hard
Okay.
time kind of matching those up. But
I have a question for you, Joe. Back in the PS1 days, was the PlayStation 1 kind of your main system in those times, or were you in Japan at that point, or were you still in the
no,
States around
I
like,
was in the U.S. then.
okay, so 95, 96, 97, 98, still in the States?
Yeah.
Was the PlayStation your primary system, or was it something else, or were you not playing games that much then, or what?
At that time, I was playing. I had a PS1 and a Saturn and a PC that I was using, and I was playing a lot of PC games at that time. I think like a lot of the main stuff I was playing was the PC, and then probably the Saturn. So like the
Okay.
PS1 was probably like my third choice out of everything, and like it's not to say I didn't play it a lot, because I had a ton of PS1 games, but as far as like, if a game came out on the Saturn and the PS1, I'd always get it on the Saturn. And a lot of my favorite kind of C RPGs came out around that time, 95 to about 98, where you had stuff
Mhm.
like, the Warcraft games, and you had Fallout 2. You had all of this, like, it was kind of like this great era for computer CRPGs, I guess. So I was playing a lot of that. But the PS1 had a ton of great RPGs as well, and I kind of like came around more to it in the middle of it, I think. Towards the end, I was like way into the Saturn, because I was crazy into fighting games. So I was importing a ton of games and getting, because they didn't come out in the US. So like your X-Men versus Street Fighter, and your Street Fighter versus Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, stuff like that I was importing. So at a point, like PCs, I was playing a lot of games on the PC, and then mostly RPGs on the PS1, and then everything else on the Saturn.
Yeah, the reason I ask, and it's kind of interesting, is like you, I was big into the Saturn then, so I kind of ignored a lot of the PlayStation stuff that came out, but recently I've been going back and discovering some of these role-playing games. A guy at the flea market usually has a lot of PS1 stuff really cheap, and I'm going back and replaying games like Brave Fencer Musashi, and um, I'm playing Kudelka,
Oh yeah,
and
Kodelka.
yeah, and games like Xenogears and Vagrant Story, and I really feel like I missed out quite a bit by not playing those when they first came out because they're really good games. Really, that's when Square was like really on fire in terms of creating traditional RPGs, but they all had something very unique about each one of them, and they all had great systems at play and like games like Threads of Fate and the Saga Frontiers and just a lot of quality stuff from Square back then on the PS1 that I missed out on.
Yeah, like Killer Jester 87 here in the chat says he would play Final Fantasy 8 or Parasite Eve and he's all set. I think that was in relation to something else, but it's kind of connects to this in that like really those were fall right into that category. Interesting kind of great RPGs that Square was making at the time, and I think there are a lot of those. I mean, I really liked Saga Frontier on PS1, and things. Parasite Eve is like one of my favorite PS1 games. I love that game. Final Fantasy VIII, I think like it gets kind of a bad rap now, but I like the. I really liked the card game in that. I was like addicted to that. I kept playing the card game over and over.
I really like the pre-rendered background look of games like Parasite Eve and like Fear Effect and things like that, where they use those static backgrounds and so much detail in those environments, and it's a lot of fun to go back and play those games. Kudelka, I'm kind of having trouble with because, and the battle system is just simply it's maddening, and there's frequent. You can want to explore these dark gothic environments and they look great, but there's so much random battle action going on, and the battles take a long time to finish, and it's going to be kind of a slog to get through that one. But like the environment and the backgrounds look so good, and it's so like creepy and dark and atmospheric that I want to push through and play more of it. It's just so, and you can really tell the age on some of them.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I think a lot of the PS1 games, obviously PS1 games look, for the most part, pretty bad right now. A lot of them didn't age very well, but I think a lot of the ones that use sprites are still pretty passable.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of it has to do with like the TV and setup. Like I have my PS2 running through component cables, and it's like a 37-inch Sony Trinitron standard. And it looks awful. Like I put a PS1 game in the PS2 and tried to play it run through component, and it just really looked awful. But if I throw in just the standard AV cables and put it in the original PS1, it's a lot better looking, and it makes it a lot less like blocky and that just overly textured look. It looked pretty decent. Games like Vagrant Story looked pretty good, and Brave Fencer looked pretty good. And so a lot of it has to do with your setup and the cables you're using for sure. But I'm really enjoying going back and playing some of these PS1 RPGs that I didn't play back in the day. I was so busy like you on the Saturn and other systems at the time. I think I still had a 3DO back in '94.
I had a 3DO, but I didn't get mine until like '98 or so.
Yeah, people can bag on the 3DO, man, but getting that for Christmas back in like I think it was Christmas of '94 or '95. It was a year before the PS1, and so it must have been the Christmas of '94, I think. There was nothing. I mean, playing Need for Speed on that thing was just everybody that saw it, like all of my buddies from school that came over, they all wanted to play Need for Speed because it was just so much better looking than anything that was out at the time. It was really impressive. It was when the system had just dropped to $400. I think my parents like went half and half on it, so it was like a little bit less. But a buddy of mine got one like day one for $700. His parents bought him it, and I remember seeing Crash and Burn for the first time, and it was just blown away. But that's that. Isn't the PS of it had what you're right. The system that most games that came out, there's very few exclusives left on it. You can count on one hand or two hands the games that are exclusive to 3DO. They've mostly gone to the system.
The 3DO had a lot of really good stuff on it. I think like a lot more people could work, but at the same time, like it was so expensive, so like not the way that gaming world was going, that that really hurt it.
Yeah, I mean that price tag, it was death, man. You got to figure every other system out was like, $200 or something. Um, 50 the most. You got $100. It just, people couldn't justify it. That's crazy. That's crazy money.
Yeah,
So
it was the same kind of thing with I think when the Jaguar was out, it was so expensive when it came out comparatively to anything else, and it had such a like it had nothing to really wow people into buying it. So
yeah,
the 3DO was pretty similar in the sense when it came out, it was so expensive, but the stuff it was offering was really not that good, and
yeah,
and I think that really hurt the way that the system was selling. And I think like even at $700, I think like it probably would have done better if it had something that was amazing, something that people would have been like drooling over. But there was just nothing.
yeah, yeah. I did a video not too long ago. I firmly believe that if a game, I don't know if you've ever played Blade Force, but if a game like Blade Force would have launched with the system where you could play, you're flying around a helicopter with an open environment and the frame rate was actually pretty smooth. If stuff like that had come out at the very, start of the 3DO's life, I think it would have changed a lot, with the lower price point. But, for all the shit that the 3DO gets, I gotta say, the Atari Jaguar, I think hands down that is my least favorite system, and I'm sorry if there's any fans out there of the Jag. That controller's awful, and I really struggle to find any enjoyment out of that system. I think the design, having the dust flap absent, I think the back of the console, how it's exposed, where all the things you plug into the back are just right out there. The controller's awful, and I did not. A buddy of mine had that back in the day when it first came out, and he had Alien versus Predator, and I don't know. I didn't like it back then, and I don't like it now. I think it's a pretty awful system.
I had a Jaguar back when it came out. Not I didn't get it immediately, but actually like it went into like KB Toys was selling new Jaguars for like $20 at one point.
Hmm.
And I bought a Jaguar, and I bought all the games that they had on sale that were all like $5 each. And I had like 10 Jaguar games or something, and none of them were really great, but I mean there was Theme Park on the Jaguar, that was good. There were I'm trying to think of what else I had. I had that Double Dragon 5, the terrible fighting game.
Did you ever have that Power Drive Rally or whatever I think it's called?
No.
And that's like the only game that I really enjoyed on that system.
I think I had Rayman also. That was good.
Yeah, that was a good looking game.
The thing the thing with it is like the Jaguar was, I had like Cybermorph, which is awful.
Yep.
Pitfall, Super Pitfall, maybe, I don't remember what it was. Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure, whatever it was on the Jaguar.
Yeah, that was that.
And I'm trying to think of. I had a couple other games I can't remember off the top of my head, but I probably had Tempest 2000 and some other stuff on the Jaguar. But I wouldn't call it my least favorite system ever, but it's pretty down there. I mean, in all honesty, I probably played the Jaguar more than I played my N64.
Yeah.
But I mean, both of them don't really hold up at all today. I think like if I think like, do I want to buy those systems again? Do I want to play? How many games on those systems do I want to play? They're both coming up somewhere pretty close to zero. So It's the kind of thing where I just feel like it's not a good system. The 3DO, on the other hand, still has a bunch of stuff that I would like to play.
Yeah, I think the 3DO definitely outclassed the Jag, and I think a big problem with the Jag was those aggressive marketing campaigns, like where they were, like do the math,
Do the math.
Like, okay, it's one thing to talk like that to people and kind of like say, oh, you're an idiot if you don't get it, you don't understand, it's twice the bits and all that. But you look at the games on paper, and it's barely better than what was out there. That's a 16-bit system. It didn't work in their favor. If you're gonna have like a bold campaign like that where you're like, oh, do the math, it's simple to see this, and then you look at the games and they're just not where they should have been. It's kind of makes you look like an idiot, when you say,
Well,
when
the
you say
thing
do
the,
the.
the thing with that is that it was almost the same kind of marketing that the Neo Geo had.
Mm,
And when the Neo Geo had that marketing, it made sense because really the Neo Geo hardware was like way better than what was out at the time, and none of the hardware could do the things that the Neo Geo could do. Like the huge sprite scaling and all the stuff. It was just crazy expensive, but they knew it was crazy expensive, so they were just kind of like marketed it in the way that was like, you know. If you can't buy the Neo Geo, you can't have the best experience, and you're poor. Get out of here. It was kind of, it was kind of like that. That was kind of the way that the Neo Geo was marketed, but the Jaguar kind of was like a continuation of that same style of marketing. That was it wasn't going to work for the Jaguar because the Jaguar didn't actually have anything to back it up, unlike the Neo Geo.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of gold on the Neo Geo, and I remember that kind of had like I can't remember the price on the actual system. Was the system really pricey too?
The system was like $600, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it was 7, or maybe it was 8 even. I don't actually remember because I remember it went down a little bit, but I don't remember the initial price. But it was really expensive, and each game was like $200. So,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
we're not talking like $200 now money. We're talking like $200 mid '90s money. It's like so
Yeah, that's
expensive. Like that keeping that in mind, like you could have bought like 3 Game Boys for that price for one game. It was like just not going to happen. People weren't going to.
yeah,
A lot of people weren't
that's
going to buy those.
that's insane because I mean, with something like the 3DO or whatever, if you bug your parents and finally convince them to actually buy it for you, at least after you've got the huge expense out of the way, at least you can afford some games. Whereas the Neo Geo, it's just like the high price never was going to end. And I remember seeing that thing in the magazines and just the games looked so good. The 2D graphics were just so colorful, and it was the arcade experience at home, back then. And that I really wanted that system growing up, and it never happened. I never knew anybody that had one or anybody that even came close to having one. But that's a really impressive system for sure. It's got so many good 2D games on there.
Yeah,
And
I had a friend actually who had a Neo Geo. He was like he was like a rich kid, and he totally had the Neo Geo, and he didn't care. His parents bought him a ton of games anyway, and we would go over his house and play it every once in a while. But it was the kind of thing where like he was the only person anybody knew who had one, and I'd see it at the shop, like go to EB, and they had like a small Neo Geo section. Who was buying it? I don't know, but I would always look at it like, really wish I could have that Neo Geo, but wasn't really happening. All right,
yeah,
hey there, Sega 94486 in the chat, just showed up.
yeah, I really hopefully when we get around, because we're gonna do more of these. I can't believe there's anybody even here because of the horrible start we had. At least a good 40 minutes of very inconcise audio, horrible video, just a real technical mess. So I really appreciate you guys sticking around. Who's out there still? I get it. It was not a good way to start it, but in the future it should be pretty smooth sailing, I would say, Joe, going forward.
Yeah, I think like the beginning was really rough. Like we were like late by an hour because of the bizarre problems we had. So many problems.
For some reason, my Mac decided to uninstall and delete my Skype. And I think Skype has changed for Mac now because it used to. I rebooted the Mac like a month ago and installed like the latest operating system, and it seemed to everything that I had on there was gone. So I had to reinstall everything. And when I installed it a couple weeks ago, and I did the podcast with Pete, it didn't stay on there. So after 45 minutes of re-downloading it and getting it set up, I think we should be good to go moving forward.
Yeah, it
Uh,
should hopefully be better. Um, oh wait, Sega 94486 in the chat is saying that he hasn't He has the AES and the CD system.
You lucky bastard.
Now, did, did you have that? Did you have that from back in the day, or did you get it later on? But even then, like, it's still not a cheap system to collect for, even now.
Oh no, it's held its value, and I don't know if you've looked at prices lately of what's going on out there, and like in the eBay world and other places, but everything is starting to get real. Like even Genesis games now. Just to give you a small example, I always liked the Turrican games, and I think it was 2 years ago. I picked up a copy of Mega Turrican on the Genesis, and I had to have it boxed to complete. So I bought a copy, mint condition, the manual's flawless, insert everything. I think I paid $44 for it. Mega Turrican on the Genesis. I checked the other day because I had taken a few games to the flea market, and the guy there was like totally trying to get me to sell him my copy. I was like, no man, I just brought it into play, and hang out and play for a minute. And I'm like, why does he want this so bad? I get home and check online. That game is up to $130 to $150 for a complete copy now. And it's just like, whoa, I'm thinking, what the hell is happening? So I start checking a few other games, and sure enough, like a lot of Genesis games are starting to get really expensive. Alicia Dragoon is up there to like $80-90 now. A lot of these games that were a few years back pretty affordable. The Genesis was a great system to collect for, unlike the Super Nintendo where everything's so expensive. But now it's like, geez, what is going on? The Genesis games are really starting to get expensive now.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I think the collector's market for games is kind of like oversaturated at this point. Like, do you remember in like the mid 90s when or the early 90s when like comic books were like super popular, and the prices were crazy, like stuff that came out like months later, it would be worth like $100 a book or something, and you'd be like wondering like, who is paying all this for these books, and like all the classic stuff was going way up in price, and then like it crashed hard, and like all that stuff is worth nothing now.
Yeah.
Or it's worth a lot less, and like it would be stupid stuff like, there was once this baby in one panel of an X-Men, and it's actually Cable from the past, 10 years in the past in the comic, and like that's his first appearance, and it would go up to like $200, and like people would be people would be all over that. And I think like what happens is like, I think games are heading right towards that, where like you can see it because the games like you're talking about have like doubled, tripled in price. Look at stuff like, even the stuff that's like the kind of cliche stuff to talk about when you're talking about high price games, like Earthbound or something. Like, a couple years ago, that game was like maybe $100 at most. Now it's like $1,000. You're like,
yeah,
it's like the kind of thing where there's too many people who want those things and not enough of them. But in Earthbound's cases, there's like a lot of people want that thing and enough of them. It's still expensive though.
Yeah, and I wonder, okay, everything is at its peak right now. You got people that grew up playing the Nintendo and Genesis and stuff, and now they're, in their early 30s, early mid 30s, late 20s, and they all have jobs now and they have money to afford it. What I'm wondering is that when time has passed and it's people that didn't grow up with Nintendo are now becoming late 20s, early 30s. They didn't grow up playing Nintendo or Genesis, so they have no kind of nostalgia attached to it. They have no memories attached to it. And now the guys that did are, 60 years old, 50, 60 years old, and they don't really want the stuff anymore. So everybody starts selling their shit because, maybe they've lost interest. And these people that haven't grown up with it, are they going to pay these prices, or is it going to drop? Because I have to think that once we get older and all the gamers get older and they don't really, maybe you get to a certain age, you don't want to play games anymore, and there's no more nostalgia attached to these games, are they still going to command these high prices? Is word of mouth going to do it, or is it just going to kind of drop back down? What do you think about that, Joe?
My guess is that it will drop back down. I'm pretty sure there's going to be like a gaming collecting market crash in terms of prices. I think there's going to be a point where like there's so many people into it, and a lot of people are into it like for as kind of speculation, like I can buy this and sell it for a lot more later. And I think a lot of people are going to get tired of doing that. It's just going to get too expensive for the initial buy and not like good enough to sell it again later, flip it easily for cash. And those people will drop out, and then what'll happen is, like, when they drop out, they'll just sell all their stuff as cheap as they can to just get rid of it. And people will buy it, and at that point the prices will start to go down. But once it gets to a point where, like, a lot of people have done that, the prices will just drop like crazy. You won't be able to, there'll be too many people selling and not enough people buying, and it'll turn in just exactly like the comic book market. That stuff is going to go down. It's not gonna go up forever. And I think you're right. Once the people who are nostalgic for those things are out, I mean, it's not to say that people, like younger people, don't get interested in games they didn't play as a kid, because that's not true. But I think the amount of kids who are gonna like play, 10 years from now, the amount of kids who are gonna want to play NES games is gonna be a lot lower than it is now. And
Definitely.
and it's the kind of thing where, like, you think of that scene from Back to the Future where, like, it's like, you got to use your hands. It's like a baby's toy. That it's like that kind of thing where people are going to look at it and they're just going to be like, this looks like something like my cereal box could play on the back of, or whatever. Like, it's not going to be something that people are excited for anymore.
Yeah, because once that technology changes to where, like, it's like real virtual reality, where it's like a real experience, and things get so far in the future where it's almost painful to go back to something like that. I mean, there'll always be a market for platforming, but as technology goes farther and farther, and we get past this medium, and it transcends into something that's just insane, it'll change everything again. You know what I mean? And it'll change people willing to go and pay top prices. It's one thing to say, oh, I never grew up with a Nintendo, I'm interested in it, let me just try this computer ROM and try it out, or versus going and spending top dollar to actually get it complete. You know what I mean? There's a lot of factors, and it could go either way.
Another thing with that, though, is that the younger you are, the more likely you are to just like be totally fine with download only stuff. It's just people are used to that kind of thing. If you're a kid now, you probably don't even care about a physical copy of anything. You know what I mean? Like, you're playing your iPhone or whatever. There's no physical iPhone games. So
very, very select few of kids would want a physical. Obviously the collectors and stuff that are younger, that are very few and far between. But like you said, most, they don't care.
You see that kind of trend all the time. I mean, even like comments on YouTube, you'll see like, look at one of Pete's videos, for example, where he's like showing some game he bought for like $9 million or whatever, and he'll show a game, and always in the comments there's like people like, why don't you just emulate it? I can emulate it for free. And that's usually younger people, because like it's the kind of thing where they don't have the attachment to the physical items that I think maybe older people do. And I'm thinking, when I'm thinking younger people, I'm thinking like 12 years old. I'm thinking like real young. Yeah. And I'm thinking that, like, even if you've seen those videos, like kids react to those videos where like they like have these like young kids and they show them things like, here's kids react to a Game Boy, and they like look at it and they like don't know how to turn it on, they don't know how to use it, they don't understand cartridges, they don't understand like what the appeal of it is. Those people aren't going to be people who are like totally collecting Game Boy games or Nintendo games or whatever. And it's like the generational thing. Eventually, like the people who want to collect these kind of things are not going to be as large as it is now. There's a casual collecting market, and you can see it on YouTube. Even people have their channels where they're doing like crazy pickups, and then they're just like, I've sold everything, I'm out, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. That kind of thing happens to people, and it's going to happen a lot more once, since the prices are going way up. People are just going to be like, I can't afford it anymore, and they're going to drop out and they'll sell everything. Or people are just going to be like, well, I'm kind of tired of it and I don't want to do it anymore, and they'll sell everything. And you can see
I've gotten that way with Super Nintendo right now. Like, there's a lot of games on Super Nintendo that I still want, And I'd like to say that when I collect, I've got to have a box, and I've got to have it complete. But when it comes to the Super Nintendo, it's not justifiable anymore. Like the prices have gotten just so out of control that I don't care anymore. I just don't care, and I can't be alone in that state of mind thinking. So
You,
yeah, it's
you
it's
and
coming.
you and your filthy disc, your cart only copies,
Yep,
loose carts.
I just don't care. It's the price. I mean, they've gotten so ridiculous that I just don't care. Yeah, I want to play them and have this stuff, and then there's the typical eBay shit. People describing stuff, but then they don't know how to pack things properly, and I can't tell you how many times I've bought like a CD-based game, and I'm pretty thorough when I ask questions before I buy it. Hey, how's the disc look? I think that sometimes people just like look at like PS1 games, for instance. It's a black bottom, so they just like pull it out, look at it. You have to get it in like the light and turn it to a certain angle to really see the bottom. So I think that some people that just don't care, they just glance over it, be like, oh, that's mint condition, no scratches. They pop it up on eBay and say it's flawless, and then not even bother to looking at it properly. And it's really frustrating that people just don't know how to see scratches. They list it as mint, and then I get it, and I have to be an asshole and be like, "Hey, man, are we looking at the same game?" And it's a pain in the ass. A lot of people don't know what mint condition means, I guess.
Yeah, a DM Wrestler in the chat says, I love audio CDs. Digital music is not as awesome as CDs. I agree. But at the same time, I don't think I bought a CD in a really long time. Um, because I don't have space to store CDs. So, like,
Yeah,
um, I think if you look at the CD market is a good kind of analog here to look at. CD market, when digital music started coming out, there was a lot of people against it, but now it's like the main kind of thing for the way music is sold. CD sales way down, digital sales way up. Almost everybody buys their stuff digital now. It's
right.
and I think like they want to do that same thing with games. And like the thing is, like I used to collect CDs. Like when I was in the US, I have about 600 CDs, probably about 500 records maybe. I've got so much stuff for music. I've got a ton of music. But since I moved to Japan, I haven't bought a CD. I haven't bought a single CD. I just don't have space. There's no space to collect games and CDs and records and stuff anymore. So
Yeah, I totally get it. The thing with music for me, real quick, is that the switch to digital, for me, it's a convenience thing. Like I'd much rather have a physical copy of a music CD and of my favorite bands and all that, but like it's kind of like a practical thing. When I'm in the car and like I'm driving, I have two hands on the wheel, and I'm looking out. I don't want to be flipping through cases and opening up CDs and switching. I know there's like disc changers or whatever, but I think in terms of like practical uses, it's just so much easier to have it. It's like a convenience thing. When obviously you're going to be at home listening to CDs too, and then you can just pop in the actual CD. But for me, the whole digital music thing, it was just so much more convenient to have it all on one little device, cycle through, no switching, no putting the disc in, taking it out, dropping the disc in the car, on the floor where you put your feet, getting fucking filthy. It's just a pain in the ass. So that's made it a lot easier.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
also the way you listen to music really counts. And since like pretty much I use my iPhone for all my music, um, it's it doesn't make sense for me to have CDs. It's like all I'm going to do is buy the CD and put it in my computer once, and then just use my iPhone forever. So it's the
yeah,
kind of thing where like I kind of understand the way it works. But there is a thing where like I kind of understand why people would want to collect CDs, because you do get artwork, you do get lyrics in the books. Do they still make those? Hell, I don't even know. But
yeah.
I
Good question.
but I remember the thing where I used to make special trips to record stores out of state. I used to go all over the place to buy records and CDs because like people would have rare ones or whatever, or there were shops that sold like live bootlegs of bands I liked or whatever. It's like you have to go all over the place. You have to go to conventions and stuff. And now like with the internet, it's just kind of like, well, I can just download that and not have to spend money and or I
Yeah.
can like, get it on iTunes for a single song or whatever. It's the kind of thing that the the kind of disposability of it has gone way up, and the will to collect it has gone way down. For I think
Yeah.
for a lot of people in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. Um, the chat, Sega X Sega 94486X. He says, "I'd like to get some of the Sega Saturn RPGs, but they are too much money now." And that's one thing that I'm very happy for, my friend, is that my Sega collection, as far as Sega Saturn, Sega CD, and Genesis, I pretty much have. I'm glad that collection's done. A lot of it was, having it from a kid, and I had to add a few things here and there. But I'm really happy that I just feel when I'm looking over at it right now, my Saturn collection and my Sega CD stuff. It's a nice feeling to look over and see that I know that I have every game that I want, all the RPGs I have. I've got every RPG in the Saturn and the Sega CD and stuff. And it's a good feeling to know that I already have that stuff. I don't ever have to fucking dick around with getting a copy from some asshole on eBay that says it's mint and it's not. Or the big problem with Sega CD and Sega Saturn collecting, Joe, is the little foam pieces that go. I know you didn't get the big cases in Japan, but they have the big oversized cases, right? And there's like a little foam piece that comes in them that holds the disc in place. And a lot of people that sell games on eBay, they don't have the original foam anymore. So one of the things I ask is, hey, could you put like a small piece of bubble wrap inside of the game? If you don't have the foam piece, please put a little piece of bubble wrap inside the case, because if not, it's such a huge open area inside of that case. Every time a game is shipped out, the CD comes off the little spindle, and you grab your package out of the mailbox, and you hear the disc, flopping around inside, scratched all to shit. And 9 times out of 10, when I ask very nicely, I'm not coming off as like, hey, do this, do this, do this, and run through a checklist. I ask nicely, put something inside there to keep the disc in place. And 9 times out of 10, they don't do it. Now, there's some guys that are good about that. They say, oh, no problem, I understand. But 9 times out of 10, you get a disc that's come loose in shipment, and it's all scratched to shit. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating collecting those big box games, because one wrong, if they're not packed properly, the cases are so long and oddly shaped that, getting tossed into a truck, it's going to crack the front of the case, crack the back of it, it's going to break those little hinges off.
The
Really,
hinges are the worst on those. They break all the
it's
time.
such a pain in the ass trying to collect that. I'm just really glad that I've got all of that taken care of.
Seriously,
So I feel,
I
I feel
when I had the Saturn, originally when I had the Saturn, I was buying games like you could buy those new and the hinges would be broken. Like
yeah.
they were all over the place, and I think like that's awful. Those cases are terrible, man.
Yeah, they are. Outlaw Star says Josh. He says, Josh, you single-handedly drove up the prices of the Working Designs games. That's funny. To be honest, man, that's like I put out a couple of videos on like the Saturn RPGs, Working Designs, and the Sega CD, and like to this day, I still get like a lot of messages saying, oh man, after watching that video, I had to go out and pick one up. So I'm not the most interesting guy. Even I don't convey things the best close. So that speaks volumes. When people see those games, like they see the box, there's a lot that it's the game. It's not me that's doing it. It's seeing the packaging and the game quality that makes them want to get those games. You know what I mean? So that's definitely says something. They're so interesting. Like when you play a Working Designs game, the way they did the scripts in those early games, they are so fun. Like I was playing Albert Odyssey the other day, and just the shit that the non-playable characters, like the NPCs in the towns, like they had some really funny bastards writing those scripts, man. There is a lot of stuff that is genuinely funny, like that the people say. It's just I chuckle every time I play that game, because the non-playable characters are so funny. You don't get that a lot these days. You don't get that kind of humor. You know what I mean? It's funny shit, man, for sure.
Yeah, Working Designs games, even back in the day, they were like a little bit, like even when they came out, they were a little bit special. They stood out from the other games on the shelf in the Saturn sections because of their packaging. Like they were embossed and like had their own kind of flavor to them. And I have a bunch of those in my well, in my U.S. collection, I guess. But I don't have them all. I didn't go crazy like you, but yeah, they had some pretty good stuff. Albert Odyssey I have, and I'm trying to I can't remember what the other ones I have are. I have to actually see my collection, but
That's a genuinely funny game. Albert Odyssey is like every town. There's just the funniest shit in the towns. I'm trying to think of one in particular that I was chuckling pretty hard. You walk into this hut and you walk in. There's like a guy pacing downstairs and he's like, "Yeah, we just moved to this new town," and he's like, "Seems to have been hit by the cleaning bug. You know, she won't stop cleaning her. She won't pay attention to me. I feel like I'm living alone in this house." And then you walk upstairs and you see the wife like scurrying around and cleaning stuff, and she's like, "Oh, you know, part of the reason I'm cleaning so much is because of that lazy bastard husband of mine. You know, I just it's not like trying to be funny or like trying to like be overly, I don't know, but it just makes you chuckle, man. It's very funny. It's very funny and very creative the way they talk. You know, like, "Oh, it's because of that lazy bastard leaving his dirty clothes everywhere. It smells like a soup tank in here." You know, just stuff like that. It's really funny, man. The little girl that goes to school, she's like, "Oh, I learned a new language at school. We're speaking phonics." You know? Oh, shit. You know, it's funny stuff, man. Same with Lunar too. There's a lot of culture jokes and stuff, and jokes about singing on key, and they had some good humor in their games. You know, it was never like a lot of the stuff at the NIS games. The dialogue can be almost like cringe, makes you cringe because of some of the stuff is so just kind of tacky. You know, whereas these games are, I don't want to say like class, but I don't know. It's just good quality writing.
yeah, it's goofy. And NIS games, like, you know, normally I play them in Japanese, but I do have some of them in English where I was like at the shop and there was like an import copy of Disgaea 2 and 3 or whatever on the PSP, or 1 and 2 I guess is on the PSP, and I got those ones in English because they were cheaper than the Japanese ones, and I played them through in English, like with the text in English but the voices in Japanese, and like the text in the English version is so bad, and I'm thinking like, you know, even comparatively, because they'll speak in Japanese and say the Japanese lines, but the English text will be really different, and it'll be weird because you'll just be like, this is just bad writing, and like it'll be like, this is either a bad translation or a bad writing, and like and I think like, yeah, Dungeon RPG and the thing is that adds the dude that the Prinnies always say. There's nothing like that in the Japanese. The Prinnies don't talk like that in the Japanese. They're not like...
Oh wow, that's like a staple of those games too, you know?
Yeah, they don't. There's no like weird thing that they say all the time in the Japanese text. They talk kind of like a little goofy, but they don't say stuff like a dude. There's no like Japanese equivalent to dude in their speech pattern.
Yeah, and like even that's on the websites and everything too. You see the little printy and like the little speech bubble, and it's like DOOD. You know, it's like a major, like their thing. You know, the printies.
Yeah, and like, so like what happens is, when I think about this, when people play their games in English, the translated games, like, it's hard to tell. I mean, if you don't know the Japanese, like it's not on the screen or like it's not translated in a way, like it's kind of like, I don't know. You can't really judge how good the translation is. And like sometimes you might come across something and wonder, like, is it just a bad line that they wrote in English, or is they're just translating it from Japanese and Japanese is bad, and you don't really know. But so you can, like, as someone who can do both languages, and if you can play them both at the same time, with like the Japanese voices and the English text, or vice versa, you can really tell like who is good at making translations for their games and who is not. And NIS is generally not. There's the stuff that I've played that's in English also, as the Japanese, is usually pretty bad. And recently I've come across this in a thing where like I have Tearing Saga. Do you know that game? It's like the creator of Fire Emblem made a Fire Emblem for PS1 essentially, with just a different name.
What's it called?
Tearing Saga.
Mm-mm.
But there's that game, and I've been playing it. And what happened was I was like, man, I don't want to play it on my PS1. I want to play it on the PSP. So I was like, well, I'll just download an ISO and play it on the PSP so that because I have the disc. I just want to play it on the PSP, but I couldn't find a Japanese only ISO because there's a fan translation for it. So I was like, screw it. I'll just play the patched one. And I was playing that in English, and like I had to stop. Like I was just like, this translation is so bad that it's like seriously detracting from my enjoyment of the game. And like, it's kind of the only option you have if you're an English speaker. But like the thing with it is that it's awful. Like there was spelling and grammatical errors and like all these like weird direct translations that didn't make any sense. And you could tell, I know, like just by looking at it, I could tell what the Japanese was, but it's so, because it's so directly translated that it's like this kind of crappy English. And like I'm looking at it and I just thought like, wow, this is like, I can't play this anymore. It's like annoying me so much how bad the translation is. And I feel bad for people who have to play games with with fan translations now, because like that was the first time I'd ever used a fan translation. And I didn't want to. I just happened to. It was like the only thing I could do to play it correctly. And like I thought, like, wow, I feel bad for people who play those fan translations, because like if they're all this quality, then you guys are really getting gypped on like the kind of quality of the games that they actually have. So, man, and it makes me wonder, like, what kinds of games did I play in the past, like when I couldn't read Japanese, like that I played in English that were just totally worse because the translation was bad.
Yeah, there's a couple on the PSP that I played that were the Legend of Heroes games, like the Prophecy of the Moonlit Witch. That had a lot of really odd sentences that just didn't make sense, and there's obviously like a botched translation job, but it was like a lot of stuff was just like, what the hell are they trying to say? Like you can spot it a mile away, and it kind of like takes you out of the flow of the game, when you're reading these sentences constructed by like a kindergartner or something, it's like, really? Is this, I mean, it was pretty bad in one of the, I think the second and the third one both had them pretty bad, but yeah, the fan translated stuff, that sucks to hear that, man, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there could be really great fan translations out there of some stuff, but man, that, especially Tearing Saga, if anybody's ever played it, I'll let you know right now, the translation is awful, like so bad that like I had to stop playing it.
I have a question for you. Is that the new Tales game, the Tales of Zestiria?
Yeah.
Is that out in Japan right now or no?
Yeah, that's out. It's been out for months.
Okay, because I read something that there was like listings showing up for like a PS4 version, and I didn't know if they're gonna put it out over here on the PS4 or maybe the PS3 and the PS4, or what's going on. I saw like a listing that they had like a SKU for a PS4 version of it, and I wasn't quite sure what you thought might be happening.
There hasn't been any announcement of a PS4 version, but they probably will. I mean, I think the reason they put it out on the PS3 in Japan is that like the PS4 hasn't really caught on in the same way that it has in the outside of Japan. It's like, a lot of people are jumping on the PS4, kind of earlier than Japan, where it's not selling like quite as high as they had hoped. And like I think like the thing with Japan is that a lot of people don't buy the console until there's something big that they want. And once, I think Final Fantasy 15 will be that game for most people in Japan. Like you can see it, like sometimes they'll do kind of polls of Japanese people, like, what do you want? What game systems do you want? What are you looking forward to in the next year or whatever? And a lot of people will be like, yeah, I want a PS4, but I'm waiting for some title like a new Final Fantasy to come out. I'm waiting for some big game to come out before I buy one. So you'll see, like, when something like Final Fantasy 15, I'm thinking probably Persona 5 will get people to buy a lot of PS4s, but maybe not, because it's also coming on PS3.
Yeah, I read the other day it was the PS4 just passed 22 million in sales, and I was like, holy shit, I don't. It's crazy that it's sold that well. It's also funny that Xbox can fuck up a #1 spot like that, in the States so easily by just that bad word of mouth, from the initial unveiling, all that DRM bullshit and forcing people to pay $100 extra for Kinect. And that's what I find funny too, is that Kinect on the 360, wasn't that like successful for a while there? I mean, it was sold like crazy, and like it kind of caught on with the mainstream, and it didn't really have a lot of games, but the Kinect really sold well, man. And it went from being this like peripheral that a lot of families were playing and selling well, to being like hated in less than a year. You know what I mean? People like did not want Kinect, and it's like totally done for now on the Xbox One. It's funny how fast people turn on the Kinect.
Yeah, it's weird because I have a Kinect and I kind of like using it. It's fun to use the Kinect, and there's like the games that I have for the Kinect are, I mean, they're mostly like dancing and exercise games, but they're fun. They're not like, it's fun to play them, and it's fun to have people over and play them. And I think people get into them. It's fun to do that kind of thing. But the thing with it is like your mainstream kind of gamer is just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get off the couch, that kind of thing. And like it kind of killed it. Like the severe negative reaction to the kind of hardcore crowd was like what kind of killed the idea of it. And like what happened is like when you move it onto your new system and you require it, and the hardcore crowd hates it. The hardcore crowd is the people who buy your system right away.
Yeah,
it's not the casual crowd that buys it right away. So what happens is, if the hardcore crowd is like, I don't want to spend that much money on it because I don't want that stupid Kinect, which we all hated last time. And what happens is that kills the image of it, because their image was good in the last generation because the saturation of 360 was high. You had a lot of people who already had one that aren't like these super hardcore people. And like what happens is, like, those people see the Kinect and they think it looks fun, and it is fun, but like a lot of people don't think so, and like the hardcore especially. And those people are going to be the people pushing the sales of the initial sales, at least, of your console. And what happens is, they don't buy it. They're just going to be like, well, PS4 is $100 cheaper, and it doesn't make me use that stupid Kinect, so I'll just go with the PS4. And that, you're right, the word of mouth on that just killed it.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad because I don't think we'll ever see what that new Kinect is really capable of. In terms of individual fingers and all that, and how much more advanced it is. We're not going to even see anything that takes advantage of it. So I don't really like the new Kinect. It's cool for like Forza. You can just like pull up a menu with your voice and stuff, and it's a lot. You can activate your GPS with voice commands, but I'd like to at least get one game that is like a demonstration of what kind of power this thing has and what it can do. Something.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I think the people at Microsoft who were pushing the Kinect had that in mind. They were thinking like, well, we can get people to implement all these cool things, and we're just like, it's all. But all the people who were making games at the same time were like, yeah, nobody likes this. We're not going to implement anything. And I think there is potential with the Kinect. It's just the kind of thing that nobody is going to support it, so there's not going to be anybody to unlock it. It's the kind of thing where like even Microsoft has kind of backed off from it entirely. When was the last time a Kinect-only game was released?
Yeah, it's been a while, and even Rare is off of the. They finally took them off the Kinect shit, So it's pretty much dead, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like it's dead. There's no reason to have a Kinect right now unless you want to do the voice and motion commands for the UI of the. It's like
Yeah, I
um
I didn't even play the new the Connect Sports. Is it Rivals? Connect Sports Rivals.
yeah.
Um, those two games. I enjoyed the two Connect Sports games. Like bowling was a lot of fun, and there was another game that was pretty fun too. I can't remember which else it was, but what this new one had like rock climbing or whatever, right? And like a jet ski thing or something where it recognized your hand, like grabbing like the rock climbing, pulling yourself up and whatnot. I guess I should pick that up. I mean, if I've got the freaking Connect, I might as well have something to at least try it out with, you know?
Yeah, it's really weird because I think the Kinect actually did have a lot of potential with it, and I know people will be kind of incredulous, but there were a lot of games that I played last gen on the 360 with the original Kinect that were better with the Kinect. Mass Effect 3 was better with the Kinect. I had a lot of fun using the Kinect in Mass Effect 3. And it was just voice commands, but like when you did the menu selections, you could speak the line, and it would register in the game, and you could like go through all the menus without just like put down the controller and do all your interactions like by talking. And it was a lot of fun to do that actually.
It does. I mean, it makes a lot better than Forza. You know, being able to pull up that the GPS system called, hey, next route, and she'll plot your next route as opposed to pausing the game, going in, pulling up the map, finding where you want to go next, and it makes it a lot easier. It's adds a pretty good experience to it.
Yeah, I think PS4 has like an option to do that now to like some kind of voice commands. So it's that kind of thing, which is like everybody can do it now. So that's all right. I think
Yeah.
it works out fine in the sense that you have the same kind of, both systems can do it, so more people are likely to use it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't know anybody who bought the Sony equivalent to the Kinect, the camera that came with PS4.
Yeah. Man, for a while there, when the system first came out, the camera was sold out everywhere, and I think a lot of it had to do with being able to like the playroom or whatever at first. It's still going on, playroom. I don't know.
I want to say they canceled it because like people were misusing it.
Yeah, like getting naked and stuff, and like drinking and being idiots.
Yeah,
Remember
I think that
one, that girl like were drinking and they got naked. Like he made his girlfriend strip or something on camera, man, and people were like watching that shit, and like it was like taken down immediately. That in the beginning of PS4's life, that playroom shit was going nuts, man. You turn it on and it'd just be everybody like broadcasting their own little world, right there on the PS4, man.
Yeah, that's kind of true. That's how it was, and I'm not sure if they stopped doing it or they've like moved it only to the PS. I think it's going, but only on the PS4, not streaming to Twitch. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they work with it anymore.
I remember that. That was funny. I wouldn't have had time before something happened like that, But yeah. But, so yeah, man. The first live episode, we started at what now?
Yeah, kind of. We kind of started a little like we started probably at 9:30, and then like we had technical difficulties until about 10. So like this episode is actually in like an hour and 20 minutes. But what we should do is ask anybody in the chat if they have any questions or something they want to talk about, and throw out some ideas if you guys have anything you want to talk about. There are a couple people in there. We've got 22 people watching. Not everybody is in the chat.
Yeah, I think I really want to get it. I really want to get the problem solved with the cameras, man, because like having the camera on, when we're talking about something, like I can pick up the game and like show the front and the back, and like if I'm talking about something, I can pick it up and like show. It's much more interactive. You know what I mean? It sucks that the second that the camera came on, there was such a drop in
Yeah,
quality.
it's weird because I think it might actually be my computer is just too slow to handle the video in and out.
Oh,
Not my internet so much as my actual laptop. Um, that could be a problem because
I think
it is kind of old.
what about like if you did it on your I was gonna say shit like PS4 or something, but I don't even know if that does it have. I don't know.
I don't think there's a way.
No, I know the Xbox One's got pretty sweet Skype setup. That's one thing that's cool with Connect there. It's got pretty cool like Skype system set up. But just know that if you guys are listening, the next episode we're definitely gonna maybe before we do the next episode get together a little bit before and just get all this shit ironed out so that never happens again. Yeah, that's nobody likes to sit there and listen to freaking 60s vinyl music, 70s voice, and no video or all those problems. So the next episode will definitely be a little more professional, I should say.
Hopefully that'll work out better. I think my overall like, we had a lot of issues at the beginning because first like, the streaming didn't work with tape, so I had to register XSplit and get like penny and get everything set up, and like then we had Josh's computer kind of freak out and delete type or whatever. He had to re-download it, and then we had to fix the sound, video streaming. It was crazy.
Yeah, they definitely changed the Skype for the Mac thing because it's not the same as it used to be. That's for sure.
All right, we have a question in the chat here from Aaron. It says BB, and he asks, "What do you think about the censorship difference in Japan and North America?" So, what? I guess we can get your side first. What do you think about the games from Japan that have been censored in the U.S.? Like what? Because I'm not sure what kind of stuff gets censored in the U.S. more than Japan, but I'll talk about the opposite side when I talk. But what do you think about that stuff?
I find it funny that here we can play a game, we can pick up hookers, take them to a secluded parking lot, bring them in the car, kick them out, shoot them, go to a strip club and watch a strip show. All this crazy shit, violent, blood, realistic, like shooting like a Max Payne 3 and those bullets and chunks of heads. Just the most visceral, violent shit, but yet when we get like an RPG that has like a section of the video where you like rub the girls, like shit like that, it seems as censored. Like we get toned down RPGs and toned down stuff in the JRPG department that's like kind of like the pervy kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. You know, like that shit gets censored and toned down, but yet stuff like Grand Theft Auto is okay. You know, I don't really understand the discrepancy there. You know, I just don't get that difference. You know, why it's okay to do the horrendous shit, but yet RPGs have to be censored because it shows like I don't know schoolgirl shit. I don't know. I don't know. It's strange.
It's weird. It's weird, like what in the U.S. constitutes an adult rating on your game. Because I mean, you'd guess that, like, you know, look at like Mortal Kombat X. Like, look at the kind of, you know, you know, when you were playing Mortal Kombat back in the day, like the digitized ones, the kind of effects that happened in those games, like even the fatalities and stuff, they're so over the top goofy. Like they couldn't possibly be realistic. But like, you know, in the new one, they are kind of realistic looking. You look at that stuff and it's like, okay, that's kind of like really graphic. But you know, when you get like something where like it's women scantily clad or whatever, not nude, by the way, just like revealing clothing or whatever, and it has to be censored. Like, sexually provocative positions are not okay, but you know, ripping somebody's heart out graphically is totally fine. Like whatever, thumbs up for that. But you know, some girl into over sexually erotic, like a kind of sexual position is like totally totally clothed but bent over in a sexual position is like totally no, no, you can't have that. Sorry, censor.
That's so weird. They show boobs in like the game Conan and like God of War. Conan on the PS3 360 and God of War, and they show boobies in Theft Auto, in the lap dances and stuff. So why is it so different for the JRPGs? I don't get it.
Yeah, that's a thing. Like if you've ever played like the Ballad of Gay Tony, the add-on for GTA 4, there's full frontal male nudity in that. There's like this like middle-aged man cock all over the place.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I do.
It's the kind of thing where like that didn't get censored, but like a scantily clad girl in a JRPG like that like gets censored. I don't understand that. Like Japan, on the other hand, on the total opposite side of that, you have what gets censored in Japan is the opposite thing. It's the violence. So like when you look at the games that are rated for like the mature rating, it's all stuff like Assassin's Creed is always ranked really high for violence in games. In Japan, it's like always get the highest rating. Stuff like that card game you're talking about that got edited in the US, like, doesn't even have an adult rating. It has like a teen rating. The
Criminal Girls got censored, didn't it? The Criminal Girls on the Vita.
Yeah, I don't think it's an adult rating either. I think it's a teen rating. It's the kind of thing where like it's like no nudity. In Japan is really strict about nudity. If you have nudity, you're an adult only game, and even in those it has to be censored. So like it's the kind of thing where it has a mosaic over it even in the adult game. So like it's not like Japan is like totally open about sexual things. Like it's still like way more so than the US would be. Whereas like with violence, it's a lot different in Japan, where like if you have like some crazy violence, you'll see if you looked at the section, the 0Z section, which is like essentially the mature rating section. It's full of games that are like Assassin's Creed, Thief, the new Thief that comes on the PS4, Grand Theft Auto is always in there. Stuff like that is in the adult section, whereas like something like Criminal Girls would like even register as a mature rating. So it's kind of a weird cultural split there. So we got another question here. What is your number one versus fighter and why? Yeah, for me, I think I don't know if I have a particular one game that's my favorite, but I would say like my favorite series overall is just going to be Street Fighter. Street Fighter, I grew up with Street Fighter, played the first one in the arcade, the second one came out, it was like a huge thing, like we used to play it every day after school. It was the kind of thing where like Street Fighter is just hands down me like the pinnacle of fighting games. Like, there's nothing that gets better than Street Fighter, and I like the way it plays. I like the it kind of set the standard for how a game could play as a fighter, like the linking back the kind of half circle stuff to do special attacks. And I think a lot of games even today are still influenced by that same style, where like there's games that aren't obviously Mortal Kombat is not exactly the same kind of thing. It has a block button and whatever, but like I think you'll find that in most cases, games that have a block button tend to be less popular than games that cycle back to block. And like a lot of special moves in games, even in non-fighting games, tend to follow that same Street Fighter kind of setup where it's like half circles forward, half circles backwards to do your kind of special attacks. And I think Street Fighter altogether just it's the most solid thing. Like people always complain like, well, they released 30 different versions of Street Fighter 4, but the thing with that is like if you play Street Fighter and like, Super Street Fighter 4 comes out, it's hype because it's going to have a ton of characters and a bunch of new stuff to do, and the fighting method is going to be tweaked, and Like for people who are really not into it, it doesn't really matter to them. But like when you play, if you play it all the time, like it matters. You can see how the characters like different, how the way everyone plays is different, how the new characters like things. And I think like the reason they release it so many times is people who actually are into it will buy it every time because they know that playing it is going to be different and it's going to be better every time. So I know people get on Capcom about that. It's the update. I buy them so like Street Fighter 5, one of my most hyped games for the PS4 right now. So what about you? Do you have any? Well, I know you're not like a huge fighter guy, but do you have any?
Yeah, my favorite fighting game. He said like when he asked the question below, he said like mechanics. Like my favorite fighter will always be Eternal Champions, like Challenge Darkseid on Sega CD. I fell in love with the characters and all their backstory and like how they died. Like they died before. They get brought back and man, I just really I have a lot of love for that game. I love Eternal Champions. It's always been my favorite. But in terms of like and Cosmic Carnage on the 32X2, it's like so bad it's good. But I thought Eternal Champions was like something really special. That was back like when Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter craze they were like two most popular and they were battling out. And, like Sega released their own, like it never, but it would go toward Mortal Kombat. I just think it's really interesting to get something like that on a console, didn't come from the arcade. But when we're talking in terms of like stuff, like actual fighting games, I like Street Fighter a lot. Like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat both took up equal amount of my time growing up. I played a lot of Street Fighter. I remember playing that and my thumbs were like raw on the Super Nintendo, and Mortal Kombat came out and just watching people in the arcades like pull off fatalities, and so I'd have to say it's like a tie between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. I can't pick one or the other. I like both of the series, and I usually buy most of buy them when they come out. So it's a toss up between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Really, both excellent series.
I guess the audio got choppy there for a minute. I don't know now.
Oh shit!
I didn't change anything, so I don't know why it was suddenly got choppy. But okay, hopefully it fixes itself because I didn't do anything. I didn't even touch the computer, so I can't really tell.
Just still going on right now. Choppiness.
I'll chat because it's probably faster. I'm not sure how much of a delay on the stream there is. Yeah, apparently it's still choppy. Weird. I don't know why that is, but I guess we should end because we don't have any other option if it's just gonna be choppy. I can't do anything else to fix it.
Yeah, like earlier, the next time before we get in, we'll kind of get on a little earlier and run through some test stuff and just kind of troubleshoot a few things and see, obviously we don't have like an audience or anything to answer questions for us, but hopefully we can get some shit figured out,
Yeah, if it's just the two of us, like I can run the stream and stream in the background on my iPhone or whatever and like check how choppy it is without it like showing up to anything. It's just the kind of thing where it's hard to tell what's happening because we can't hear the stream, and for us, like it sounds really clear to me. Like Josh's voice sounds clear, and it's not like getting choppy at all. And I assume mine is the same for you.
Yeah, sounds fine. But yeah, thanks for sticking with us, guys. And next one will be much more. It'll be much more enjoyable. I think we'll get this shit worked out and get it situated.
Yeah, hopefully it's better next time we get the kinks worked out. The beginning should at least be faster, if anything.
Oh yeah, for sure. It can't get any fucking worse.
Yeah, then it couldn't possibly get worse than it was. So, yeah, I guess thanks for coming into our first plague in chat here for the live stream version of CxG, which is hopefully how we'll be doing it full on, just because we're busy. We can't edit episodes; it takes long, and this is much. I kind of enjoy the interaction as well. It makes the way things are going a lot better to me. I think it's nice to have the people chatting.
Yeah, and once we get a couple under our belt and we get all the shit worked out and people actually can look forward to, seeing, then it'll be a lot better all around.